impact that the injustices have means that we need to have a deeper understanding within ourselves to be able to understand social injustices that are occurring on a wider scale outside the home. Imam Rida alayhi salam at first insisted, or resisted rather, the invite by Mamun, and when he was invited, he felt that he needed to be reluctant, only because at the time he was unsatisfied with the reasons behind why Mamun would invite him over to Khorasan. At the time, he felt that there was no need for him until request became quite insistent, and he left his home to build his home in Khorasan. He left his young son, Imam al-Jawad, and he left his home, making a big sacrifice while he migrated to Khorasan. Likewise, in today's life, we are also doing the same. We believe that we are looking for something better, and we leave our homelands, and we have done so in the past few generations. We can see that in the last few decades, our families have moved home from, for example, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so on and so forth, all these various countries that we've left behind, calling UK or our Western society a home for ourselves. What I want to discuss today is that sometimes when we leave home, we are looking for something, also known as, when we look at the phrase, the grass is greener on the other side. What are we actually looking for? What are we striving for? Is it a home that we can make and call it ourselves a home? So what is home sweet home? So today, I just want to touch upon a few aspects of social injustices which are impacting our lives, because we have felt that the Western society can make those, keep us with those, within those standards and boundaries. What we haven't maintained is our religious faith within ourselves. So it's better that we understand what social injustices are. So relating it back to our families migrating from east to west, and we hope that in the hope of establishing homes, one would expect that we would have a good standard of life. And then years back, I remember when I was growing up in the UK, we had alims arriving from the eastern subcontinent and coming to the UK and saying, "Oh my Lord, you have such wonderful standards in the UK, standards that Muslims should have." And I felt, we do have those standards. There are, we have a good standard of living, we have homes, we have jobs, we have everything that we strive for. But there was one thing that was lacking, and that was justice. So I've grown up thinking, where is our faith? What are we doing? What are we striving for? So we settled in this foreign land with expectations, and we thought we were living in a state of contentment. Over a period of years, situations for Muslims has affected us, because not only do we feel that we are not befriended by some of our community, but that we are living in pockets of Muslims that seem to segregate themselves from various communities. So when Imam Rida alayhi salam was given this opportunity to move to Khorasan, he felt that there was this new standard for him. What he didn't know at the time was those double standards that he was going to be living by, or that he was going to be faced by similar situations that we are faced with, various guises that people put up. So we could spend a lifetime perhaps, which only involves going to work in the morning, coming home, having dinner, and then going to bed. This would be one way of establishing ignorance, something that we sometimes have because we fail to understand what social justices are or social injustices are. But how can we overcome that? When a person who doesn't socialize or has any further interest in current affairs, they are isolating themselves from the current affairs and current issues that are happening across the world. A person who only cares about what is happening in their own country perhaps, and that has been happening for a while, where if I, for example, come from Pakistan, I only want to know what's happening in Pakistan. But I wouldn't be too considerate or be concerned about what's happening in the UK, because I fail to understand that this is my home. Or we may even possess a selfish attitude for our worldly gains, or we are compelled to reach out to material needs, but sometimes at the price of others. That is social injustice. But alas, there are injustices, and we are unjust to ourselves because there are some things that we possess within our own hearts that we sometimes fail to understand, that they are sometimes the deeper causes that cause problems within our own homes, but also within our society and our communities. So it's looking at things that really affect us and what causes or what are the roots that actually are catalysts to social injustices that sometimes we fail to recognize. Well, living in the UK, one thing that we've failed to recognize is our own social injustice to our own selves. That injustice is like a disease of the heart. And I was reading through Al-Mizan, a book by Allama Tabatabai, and he discusses diseases of the heart in page 228 of Al-Mizan in volume number 1. And he discusses the level of hypocrisy and how that occurs. So you can see the level of hypocrisy in Mamun's regime, and how previous to that, historically, the hypocrisy that has been possessed by all the other regimes in the past and has affected the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So there are many verses in the Quran when discussing the diseases of the heart. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and I was looking into this quite carefully because I thought it touched upon a lot of the things that we see in the Western society. So one of the verses that came to me was, "And whoso saveth the life of one, it shall be as if he saved the life of the whole of mankind." And I looked quite deeply into that, but I could not find something of value in terms of what it actually tried to imply. So when I looked deeper into Al-Mizan, I found that there were two different stories, or two stories that one narrative was based on the killing of Abil by Qabil in the Western side. We know is the death of Abel by Cain. But then I looked deeper and I was looking at other meanings through Bani Israel, but then at the same time looking at the regime and how we have these double standards in our society, how people make you think that you are going out for the greater gain, but at the end of the day, they have a double standard, a level of hypocrisy that affects us all. But at the same time, we're looking at the disease of our own selves. How does that impact us? Where is the social justice in how we are ignorant? So there are three things I thought about: ego, I thought about jealousy, and I thought about ignorance. And if you look quite carefully, all of these three tie in very well quite together. So the story actually doesn't start with Cain and Abel or Abil and Qabil. It actually starts the time when Shaitan felt jealous of a human being being created and having a more worth in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created him. He felt his worth had reduced. So the definition of akhlaqi of jealousy is to have a covet or a desire to have something that somebody has that they themselves don't have, or they don't want the other person to have. And that is one of the very, very dangerous traits. I was looking into the book by Dastaghaib Shirazi, Allama Shahid Dastaghaib Shirazi, and it talks about the vices of jealousy and how it really impacts the soul. So when we're talking about the impact on the nafs, we can understand that it stops us from gathering people together, it stops us from valuing other people, valuing the work that other people do, and it stops us from having a congregation, it stops us from having a community. And that state of jealousy is something that it could be a single factor by itself, but it could be a combination of things. And I was also looking at how it becomes a level of sickness, how it actually influences the ego. So state of jealousy could be something that could impact us, and it has been doing so. So if you look at all the Western regimes in terms of how Islam is valued, you will find that Islam has some forms of strength that cannot be comprehended by the West, but because they all have their own agenda, Now that agenda comes in through that jealousy. Why is it that Islam was one of the main religions that actually spread so far and vast across the world in certain decades? Is that not something that should trouble us? So in combination with ego, where do we see ourselves? In nations and tribes. And when I was looking at the ayat, which reflects upon people working within tribes and communities and how we can actually work as united people, I came across a verse in Surah Al-Hujurat in verse 13, which talks about, "O you men, surely we have created you of a male and female and made you tribes and families that you may know each other. Surely the most honorable of you with Allah is the one among you who's most careful of his duty." That also came across to me, because I was thinking, if jealousy is something that prevents us from doing our good work and our good deeds, then that is something that we need to remove from ourselves first before we can talk about this and discuss it on a level where we discuss it on a vast or global scale. So when we were looking at education, morality, discrimination, and everything else that has been sat into us in the Western society, we have a major problem. If within our own selves, in our communities, we segregate ourselves and isolate or find that we've got, or we socially boycott certain groups or members of our own community, our Muslim community, then we are committing a social injustice. I'm not sure how a lot of people actually view this, but I was feeling that where we have pockets of different people, and remember one thing I was going to say was when we were looking at Imam Rida alayhi salam and we were talking about him migrating into Khorasan, we're also looking at how we've also come into the Western society. Do we not also want good standards? Who is stopping us from having those standards? Are we content with ourselves? How does jealousy form problems for us? And why is it that if we can't alleviate our problems, our ego problems or sickness that we possess, that we expect the Western society to actually consider our own needs? So first and foremost, we must consider the fact that we all belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is this universalism that we need to come by and promote unity before we can actually point fingers at the West. We're also looking at problems within the society, and we're looking at how there is discrimination amongst ourselves. When we're talking about our communities, we're also looking at discrimination of our communities in terms of blacks and whites. We're looking at the problems that Malcolm X faced. We're looking at problems that we have created for ourselves. So what I feel is that we have felt social deprivation within our communities, and this is happening to us because we are desensitized by what we see on the media, how it actually uses or lack of or it does actually lack in media in terms of media coverage, and it forms societal problems because it is immune to feeling our pain. In the Holy Quran, chapter 11, verse 85, we find where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Observe fully the measures and the balance with justice. Do not cheat the people of their goods by employing short weights and measures, and do not act wickedly on the earth, causing corruption." What is happening to us is slowly sitting in within us. We are actually going out for the material gains, and we are actually socially depriving people from their needs. So if we want to establish justice and humanity, we have to try and do something in our communities first, and then we need to prevent ourselves from actually causing harm to others or causing social deprivation. And this is something that we expect. We can't be expecting this to be happening from Imam Mahdi Jallahu Ta'ala Farajahum. So we shouldn't be remaining stationary. What we should be doing is preparing ourselves every single day, looking at our own vices first, looking at what is available to us and how we can actually overcome our own problems within our families, within our communities, and then act globally in supporting our own Muslim brothers. What we've found in the past is that we've had protests where we've had a very, very low turnout, because if, for example, I think Brother Zain mentioned that we had we had genocide in Pakistan, Shia genocide. 86 to 96 people were killed in one day only because they were Shia Muslim. We also noticed that in last year in Al-Quds rally, Sheikh Zaki's family, 3 of his sons were murdered, apart from other people who were actually in the rally that day. But when we held a protest, there were only 10 people who attended. Is that because we have nothing to do with them? Is it because we segregate ourselves, or we isolate ourselves, or isolate them from society? Do they not have a right to receive the same support? So when we're looking at humanity, what we should be looking at is working towards selflessness and altruism. What we've done in the past is that we've segregated the communities. We've felt that there is no need for them. But what we've done is we have actually allowed forces at work to set in and grind the Muslims apart and divide them further. There is a famous hadith which discusses that that when a Muslim feels the pain, it's like a body. When a part of the body feels the pain, it's like as if the whole Muslim ummah should be feeling the pain. And that is how we should be. We should be united. We should be holding onto the rope without causing discord. Somebody once said that happiness in fulfilling the exhortations of Allah and doing good are the only such systems in our existence where they generate more happiness and more good. The idea is that we need to establish social justice. We need to do that from the very, very beginning. And we need to make sure that we are not putting our weaknesses into the hands of those whose agenda is to fulfill theirs at the expense of Muslims across the globe. What we should be doing is challenging the status quo, not as revolutionaries, but as shown by our role models, the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, using our akhlaq and ethical principles. So what we are saying today is that do not let your weaknesses be the ground force of somebody who's working to manipulate and divide the Muslim ummah. And with this, I would like to say thank you very much to the scholars who helped me or supported me with the work that I've done and approached yourselves today.